the term for like was it the nature of beginning or something like that?
Something like that.
Is that epistemology or is that something different? I
Um,
feel dumb because I used to know all these words really well. Maybe I drink too much.
I mean, use it or lose it, right? You probably just haven't needed to. Maybe no, nonsense.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, it's like it's only useful in academic settings. Like I can describe the thing. I don't need the word necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like all the myths are either star stuff or earth stuff, and earth stuff is star stuff. So I mean, we're doing the Norse myths as the next episode.
Yeah.
Got some fucking reading to do.
I should brush up on it. I feel pretty confident, but I go through giant waves of finding it really interesting and then just kind of coasting on that knowledge and then wanting to know more. It frustrates me that we as a modern day people don't know so much of it. I hate history because so much of it is lost. We just don't know.
Well, it's funny because it's also a modern, like compared to the other religions and mythologies, it's relatively modern.
Yeah, yes, in its way, yeah. But that's for next week, folks.
Mm-hmm. But this is the official start of the unofficial second season. Because we tried really hard and then burnt out and then also forgot that we both get busy during the school season. So we got burnt out right before it got harder to do. So
yeah. Who knew teaching would suck up so much of my time and attention?
And I fucked around
kids.
I fucked around and went blue collar, so
yeah.
I have an 8-hour day and I'm like, wow, it feels so nice to have like sunshine and time. I probably forget when I like make posts or think about like, man, how do people have time for shit? I'm like, oh right, I work 10 hours more than the average day. And people complain of having 40 hours. I'm like 50, 60 and I still like do shit. I'm like, man, like how do people have hobbies and all these things? I'm like, well, if I had 10 more hours a week, it'd be easier. So
sure. Yep. Absolutely.
The worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you.
No, it's true.
But today relates to kind of our hiatus, like at least part of what I went through during it. And for me, one of the reasons for the project, which is existential angst. So quick breakdown, different than existential crisis. And I did a Substack post about it because I'm going to start doing more Substacks to tie in all this because I like writing and sometimes it's good to get the gears going. But so existential crisis is why are we here? Who am I? Right. And if you're having an existential crisis, you're going to have existential angst, but you can have the angst without the crisis. Because being into philosophy, I was into, the why type thing. I've come around that it's not, we might not be able to know, and it might not be prudent to really like pursue that overall. So yeah, the big why, like, meh, whatever. However, existential angst is what should I do? And that's a big thing.
And you know me, I like to really dissect word usage, like which words we choose to use for certain situations. And most people, I would gamble, feel this angst. Like we all call it an existential crisis, but that's much more of a big deal than we give it credit for. Like I think we're diluting what that actually means. We're using that as a replacement for this existential angst.
Yeah.
And most people just don't know to use that term. Most people don't know that term. I didn't really know it until you talked about it with me. Like we just see, oh, I'm having an existential crisis. Ha 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 ha, But yeah, that general underfeeling, that underpinning feeling, that's angst. A crisis is like, what's a good way to put it? Nature, you can only fuck with nature so much, right? It's like the pulling back of a slingshot. And nature corrects itself quickly and violently. That's more of a crisis. It's that whiplash effect. The angst is like the pulling of the rubber.
Yeah. Oh, and the crisis, like, to be going through an existential crisis, is the why or why not thing, right? Like nihilism.
Hmm.
It's very closely tied together because it's like, okay, well, I can't find a meaning. There is no meaning, right? Like that is one of the results of existential crisis. So you
Right.
run into nihilism stuff. Um, but I feel like most people, like when they say like the why bother thing, it's like, okay, that would be existential crisis. Um, and even we were talking about before we started recording, like atheism, but it's like even atheism is like, you're here, do things like you can do good for people, you can be a hedonist. Like it's pretty easy, even if you don't know the truth, the ultimate why. Like it's pretty easy to get a placeholder. And if you study philosophy, like when you get into like Stoicism and Taoism and that type of thing, it's like it might not matter so much.
Right.
But no matter what, you're going to run into for somebody who's into philosophy or introspection. It's what separates people who it, it used to be, you could say, like, or waking up or whatever, but all that stuff's been so terribly used as terminology. But it's that when you have more of a sense of yourself and you're not just floating through life, that
Hmm.
one of the first things that happens is like, okay, what should I be doing? Um, like you start to question like how you're spending your time, like who you're spending your time with, what your priorities are. And that's the angst. That's not the crisis. That's just angst.
Absolutely. And so, is this angst, in your opinion, centered around? Is it a hmm, is it a form of decision paralysis, or is that like a manifestation of it?
Yeah, I would say that that's part of what happens with it. Um, yeah, it falls into the quote of, there's two quotes of it. One of them, but the other one is the world's so terrible because, was it, wise men are so full of doubts and fools are so confident.
Is that's yeah, that's a paraphrase of it, but yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it's the people who don't question. It's easier to do actions because either they're not thinking about it or they're reactive. But in either way, it ends with them taking action. Or when
Hmm.
you put in this middle ground of thinking, or like thought process of a deeper nature, not necessarily just a quick uh, decision tree, right?
Hmm.
You pause it somewhere in there to like parse it out. It's going to be harder to make decisions until you get your bearings. And
Hmm.
I've talked about it in the post, but like my trouble with it is because we've talked about Taoism a lot, so that type of stuff has been more prevalent. I've been taking more time to like enjoy the little things, be in the now. I did a good stint to try and recover from the winter low, the winter blues, by doing that. But then the angst started building back up because I'm like, okay, I could just work, have the family, have the hobby, and like just fuck off and live and be happy.
Hmm.
But the world doesn't become a better place because of that. Like even if I'm becoming a better person, sure, I'm in some, I guess, small way like making the world a better place. And maybe this is where my angst is, the tension of, do I think and align myself to like planning and strategy for a future, or is it really the full truth of it is to, or the full wisdom is to just live in the now, and whatever effect happens. But to me, I have a hard time making that living in the now and in the present thing compatible with strategy. And I like, that's where the rub is for me.
Yeah. And it's funny because strategy is very like forward thinking. It's usually goal oriented. You
Mm-hmm.
want to achieve a thing, and strategy is the path and choices to that thing. Um, and some of the greatest people who wrote on strategy, you're gonna laugh. The samurai were people who really, they're famous for it. Historically, they wrote everything on strategy, um, and they all stole it from the Chinese. But Sun Tzu and all them. Good artists. What is it? Good artists borrow, great artists steal. So, but there's one book that I mention in an older post of ours. Um, it's the book Hagakure, Hidden Leaves, and it basically talks about it's a like treatise on living as a samurai with their mindset and their mannerisms and just kind of a manual of sorts for samurai. And it's old. It's like Miyamoto Musashi, who lived in the late 15 and early 1600s, references it in his works. And it talks about less about here's how you do this stuff, like positioning men here and doing all this and kissing the shogun's ass just enough, but not too much to get,
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. It doesn't really talk about that. It's wake up knowing, like being ready to die. And what they mean by that is not just throw your life away. They weren't about just throwing your life away. It was having the conviction to be a certain type of person, which is that's their sense of honor. So it's not all these glorious deeds and accolades and gaining as much wealth and power as possible. They did that because humans do that. But the samurai philosophy, Bushido, the way of the warrior, is about like have the conviction to be who you are and be willing to end there. Like you're ready to die because you're a complete person. You don't have to work on developing like your sense of finished product. I mean, they still
But
developed. I know I'm talking in circles, but like, do you
but
kind of get what I'm saying?
but to tie it in, the point is like they don't wake up with a goal in mind, right? Like their
Pretty
goal
much,
is
yeah,
to be, and the moment they do that, they no longer have a goal, so they can
yeah,
approach everything with whatever is appropriate for the training or the battle or whatever that is. But that, which this is like to the point of like this balance between the two. Um, the whole point of Buddhism, Taoism, Stoicism is to remove the goal. That is like the fundamental thing is pull the goal
hmm
out. The goal is to just be here. That's it. Because then you immediately accomplish it and you can move on to other things.
yeah. And it's funny because, well, let's just use Christianity as like the monotheistic type of thing, but it applies to so many more of them. Uh, if I recall, Jesus also talks about just be here, be nice to each other, like look at what's in front of you and try to make it better. That was kind of his whole thing.
Mm.
And I think the older Christianity got, the more it was about do these things so you get into the heaven, right? Like
Mm.
it became about the goal. It's not like it became less about the doing of the things and more about the goal. And now that's all people talk about is, got to get to heaven, got to get to heaven.
Or
And
the
never,
spreading the message of Jesus.
right, right. That's just it. Yeah. They never mind living the message of Jesus. It's all about spreading it.
Mm-hmm. And not spreading through works, because everyone likes to quote the like, man cannot get to heaven through works alone, like, or in the presence of God through works alone, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, although there is a contradicting quote. I mean, the easiest one is always just like it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to be in the presence of God.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
subtle, not subtle.
Right. No, that's just it. Because, if you're ultra wealthy, that means you have probably neglected people that you could help.
You have to. I mean, that was one of the
Yeah.
posts I did about like if you made $1 million gross, or not gross, net a year,
Mm-hmm.
like the amount of things you could do with it and still make a month the average income of an American household is fucking wild.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then you start to ask, like, I want to make sure we keep it on the existential angst anchor. Do people who do that, are they trying to escape from this feeling of like, what does it all fucking mean? Like, are they just trying to keep busy and achieve and gain more and more? Like, is it that it's almost cliche to talk about, but are they trying to fill a hole inside of them that can't be filled? with money
They
and
have to,
things.
right? Like, because the amount of motivation it takes to do that kind of work. And I am okay. Back to we got this trouble. We have like two different bases that are kind of our ideal audience, and the whole point is we're trying to bridge the gap. But
Well, we need
with
to
the
talk about the differences in order to like understand. We have to
right,
understand.
and it's the we'll say one thing like yeah, like screw the rich people, but then
I
hold
want to
up,
be rich. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying this to the entire internet. I would love to be rich. I'm
and
trying.
I'd rather live in a socialist society, right? Like there's a bunch of different
Mm-hmm.
elements of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I have to hear one more person be like, oh, well, they're rich because their parents were rich, at some point, one of those parents, one of those grandparents, wasn't rich. Like if it's like, oh, that's how most people get their wealth. Sure, somebody got them there first. Like the fact that they just gloss over it with the like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yes, most people like had an advantage. Somebody gave them that advantage that didn't have it. Like, let's be clear that somebody had to do it first. Like,
Yeah.
I yeah,
And a lot of that
unless
is
everybody's related to Charlemagne, whatever. Like, I don't know.
right. Yeah, a lot of it is right place, right time, itis, or just born into whatever. Um, I just finished reading for like the umpteenth time the autobiography of Ben Franklin. Fantastic book for every American, every person, but every American especially, because he's the quintessential American man,
Mhm.
uh, and one that you should actually aspire to be like. Because he was not poor, but he was the youngest son. He had like 3 or 4 brothers. He was the youngest son, and so like didn't you know wasn't part of the family business and didn't really. He was just not necessary in
Well,
colonial
he was
America.
part of the family business, but he had no hopes of taking it over
Exactly right. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. He did apprentice. He did all
because
that.
he was jacked because he worked in the family business.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. We all think of him as this like bald on top and slightly rotund guy. He was 80 something when he died. Like that's
Mhm.
old Franklin. Everyone looks like that when they're 80. Most people look like that
But
when they're 80.
very similar to like Socrates' nickname being broad-shouldered, like or no, Plato being the
Yeah.
broad-shouldered. Yeah, like
Yeah.
Franklin was known as a beast. Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
but no, he
But
came from what would be the equivalent of lower, like middle, or lower middle class, where
uh-huh.
his family had money because they owned a business. They like were in the merchant class, I guess, rather than like
Yeah. They
whatever.
were yeah. What did they do? Candle making, essentially. His dad did
Oh,
wax.
did he leave to go do
His
the other work?
brother, so the eldest son, takes over the family business.
Mm-hmm.
One of his older brothers left because he wasn't in it. Like none of the younger brothers were inheritors,
Mm-hmm.
of the business. So they had to go apprentice and find their own thing. One left to go printmaking, and young Benny followed that brother. So he
Okay, yep,
apprenticed under his older brother. Yeah.
gotcha.
And
Which that would be an example
became
of,
smarter than everyone else.
but
And,
it's like, oh, that opportunity would be an example of his privilege, right? Like, oh, his brother could go out and like he still had to work an apprentice, right? They're tradesmen.
his brother was garbage at it. Ben had to
Well,
like go do other things. He had to travel to England where things are much older. Like he is the rags to riches guy. Like, because he had to travel to England. He was gonna get like a letter of like a letter of note or credit from the governor of I think Massachusetts at the time, or what was Massachusetts. And that dude was a total flake. He was just like, "Oh yeah, you'll get it, you'll get it, you'll get it. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry." The morning of his departure, the governor's assistant like tells Franklin like, "Yeah, you're not getting it." And he fucks off to England with nothing, like a few dollars in his pocket or whatever. So basically, starts over, and he did admit to. I've been reading a lot of autobiographies. I love hearing these people's stories in their words. Whether they're entirely truthful or not isn't necessarily the point.
don't
It's
let
hearing
a don't let a fact get in the way of a good story.
exactly. Yeah, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. That's exactly it. And so he learned the trades, and he definitely admitted to being like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Like I was talking to a student about this today about we were talking about Mozart and how very much like Michael Jackson he was. And the mention was like, we treat people in history as like a different species, It's like we're talking about, oh yes, the apes of Madagascar, and like it's like, no, these were just folks. They were just people.
People do with all the ancient alien stuff pisses me off with that too, where it's like, how could these ancient people know? It's like they had time. They had a lot more time. Like,
yeah, they had time, and like, if you were gonna really go for something, like, once you started, your reputation was, based on you fucking doing it.
it's specifically, somebody brought up the pyramids are like within like tiny degrees aligned with true north, west, and south. It's like, that's math, bro. If you just put a stick in the ground and measured the sun enough, you could fucking do that. It's not fucking, I mean, it's magic, but it's not
right
rocket science.
It's I mean, but it's true. I mean, they discovered the Earth was round a long time ago.
Pretty quickly.
Just by measuring. Yeah, pretty quickly. Just by going, that shadow wasn't there before.
Yeah. To fucking prove it, one of the first proven things was I think it was in somebody from the Mediterranean. I think it was Egypt. Mm-hmm. Don't know if it's Greek Egypt, ancient Egypt.
It was somebody, yeah, right. It was somebody visiting Egypt, I think.
But this is different than the walking one. This is the sail. They sailed around Africa. They're like, all right, fuck it. We're just going to fucking go around the continent. Yeah. And they're like, okay, the stars are different. And they just watched the sun like wobble and then wobble back. And they're like, okay, it went, up and down. So if we're facing it, and we needed that to happen, we'd have to be on a curve. They're like, oh, it's a globe. Like,
right. Like, and no one was just like, oh, this can't be. It's like, oh, neat. Like, we could use that. That's good information. We could use that. And so we did. But
where the fuck were? Okay, so Franklin, yeah.
So we did all this, and I'm reading another biography of. This one's very niche to me. It's a guy named Herbert L. Clark. Herbert Clark, who was one of the most famous cornet trumpet players in like the 1880s into the early 20th century.
1880s?
1880s, yeah, the turn of the century. But when I say that, I mean the last century, not the current. Yeah.
Oh yeah, quick pet peeve, because I've been reading more somehow. I don't know how I find time for fucking anything. The fact that 1900s and 19th century are the opposite things. Moving on.
I had to really think about that. Yeah, the first century is 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
Not 100.
Which logically makes sense. It's just the fact that I have to like stop a second and be like, okay, 19th century, and then go backwards, but if it's 1900s, go forward. Just
It's one of those things where it's like having to sing the alphabet in your head every time when you're alphabetizing stuff.
It's just I tried to train it out of myself, and I was like, oh, I could definitely train this out of myself. Not worth the time.
It isn't. Screw that. Sing the song. Sing your silly little song. No one's listening. It's fine. Do what works.
Okay, so autobiography of trumpet player at the turn of the 20th century.
Right. And this man became one of, like, he's still talked about like 100 years later. He died in the 1920s, I believe. But so I'm reading his autobiography, and once again, people had a lot more time and a lot fewer distractions. That's a big one too. Or at least, I don't really like it saying it that way. And I think this is important to our conversation of a lot fewer distractions is one thing, but I feel like there's always distractions because you can choose to distract yourself even if you're not conscious of that.
Well, and there's the famous picture of people like, oh, people complain about everyone on their phones. It's a picture of a bus with everybody with noses in the newspaper. Like,
exactly, right. So I prefer to think of it in terms of instead of, there were a lot fewer distractions. There were a lot less ways people could demand your attention back then.
Mm-hmm.
So like, because I view our sense of like, this definitely plays into the anxiety of what we're talking about. we individuals are so accessible from the outside now,
Mhm.
just entirely, and it's bothersome. But Herbert L. Clark, just to circle back to that real quick, um, he was known as one of the greatest trumpet players on the planet, still to this day. Like people talk about it. Um, he sucked when he started. He started with nothing. He was dirt poor. You know, um, I don't remember what his dad did. His dad, they traveled around a bit. So what did he do? It doesn't matter. They had enough money to like be a family unit, but nothing extravagant. Like the boys all had their jobs, and this kid just loved music because bands, wind ensembles, military bands, that kind of stuff, the type we have in like schools. Those were like the pop star things of the day.
Hmm.
Those folks went on tours and did all that. Uh, and he fucking loved it. He fell in love with that stuff and wanted to do it really badly. He just wanted to do it so bad. And his dad had like some old instruments that he literally took like wax and tried to like put it over the soldering of a trumpet that was like falling apart. Like he wanted it real bad. And I think there's something to that, that we could all take from, of like, if you really want to do something, you'll do it poorly and with whatever materials you can find.
Hmm. Well, and if you and having worked with musical artists, if you really want it, you'll get better.
And that's kind of the point of what I'm getting at. Thank you. You've been so good at like keeping the bumpers up while I bowl.
And we balance each other.
We sure do. We sure do. And so yeah, and he's unafraid to talk about how nervous he was, how scatterbrained he was. Like he was, when he did get in these ensembles, he was like last chair because he was young and got nervous and his lips dried up. He was so nervous and he just like couldn't. But they were just like, but he's his dad's son. His dad was like a prominent like musician or something. He was always a church organist. That's why.
Mm.
So a respected person in the community. And it's like, oh, just put him in 12th chair, whatever. Who cares? No one's gonna hear him anyways. But he was just so happy to like be in a band. Yes, like all that kind of stuff. And he talks about like how he would get lost because he was just listening to other people, and when the trumpet was supposed to come in, he just didn't. He went space cadet. It's like, okay, it's my turn now. His first parade, in order to get his own cornet, his own trumpet, he faked when he was 14. He was a big lad. He faked being 18 to join what was essentially the version of the National Guard they had. This was he was born in America, but living in Toronto. So this was the Canadian kind of reserve. So he faked being 18, got his cornet, was so happy. And it was the opening of Parliament. It was weather like we're having out right now, which is in the negative Fahrenheit degrees. And he
Good
talks
time for a
about
metal instrument.
Exactly. No, he talks about that. It was just shitty. The valves froze. Like the mouthpiece took skin away when he took it off. Like, which, if anyone has ever been in like marching band, especially in the Midwest where we are, like that's such a universal brass player's experience. So just to understand that, one of the greatest musicians of brass playing in all of history started out as just another 14-year-old schmuck. Like, it's really important to understand that. Like, and all of that is to say that it's tying back to what you're talking about. If somebody, like, no matter what privilege you have achieved or have received, somebody did the work. And you can also do the work.
Okay, this is a good comparison thing, though. So that's an example of the in the now thing, right? Like you have a path, right? I've started just using the difference between a goal or an objective and a path.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
That's what I've been thinking about. So if you're living in the now, you just set a direction and you just fucking walk that way.
Anecdotally, sorry to interrupt you, my life got a lot better when I did that. Like...
Yeah, so this episode is a bit personal because I'm partly trying to work this out.
Good. We all are. We all are. We must share each other's like
Because
stories. We're here to support each other.
in contrast, because I think it's Carnegie's rags to riches, right? Like he was ghetto poor.
Correct. Rockefeller was not. Carnegie was.
Yeah, no, Rockefeller ties to old money. No, but anybody who like lumps him together does not know the history of Carnegie because he was rags, actual rags. Like,
right. Yep.
And what allowed him to do it was strategy. Like he had, like his version of now was just being immersed in his own vision for things, right? Like so you get these two different things. And it's the back to the struggle of the existential angst of what should I do? If I want to be happy, right? Whatever, we're not talking about that. Living in the now is better. If I want to create change for the world, for other people, it seems like it would make more sense to turn my now into being immersed in the vision, right? So that's kind of where I've been at with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that the greatest change makers started with a very personal vision, right? I mean, I also read Henry Ford's autobiography, and he didn't necessarily at first, think about business too much. He was a machinist. He tinkered around on his family's farm tractors and machines, and his whole thing was, how can I make this better? Like, how can I make this more efficient? How can I make this work better? And then how can I help? And then he was very much like, how can I help other people with their work? Because he didn't build a car. He built an engine at first. That was his whole thing. And yeah, then eventually he invented the automobile to help farmers. So like that's why the Ford pickup truck is such a prominent, like, part of that lifestyle, because that was the original intent of Henry Ford was, cars make farming a lot more efficient. So it really did start with a personal, like, curiosity. Franklin as well. Ben Franklin is Ben Franklin from one word, and that was curiosity. Everything.
But it's the approach, right? Because I would put Ben Franklin into the strategy camp.
Yeah, he didn't really have any like MO, like as far as I will gain this much wealth by the time I'm 60 or whatever it is. He just kind of had a trajectory. And Ben Franklin, I think this is public knowledge, but if it's not, he was super publicly minded. He started.
Yeah, maybe he'd be in the path camp then, huh?
Yeah, I think so. Because he was curious, and he wanted to make things better. And he started locally, right? He started a club where a bunch of dudes shared their books, shared their personal libraries, and was like,
the Junto.
This would be important. Well, he extended it, right? He invented the fucking public library system in America.
What was the club called? Because I created a group based after it. I think it was Junto, right?
I don't recall, really.
Oh, okay. This I actually have to look up. Ben Franklin.
That's fine, yeah.
Reading.
But yeah, so he did, and he's just like, it starts out.
Junto.
It's the inventor's mindset. You got it?
Yeah.
Yeah, look it up. Like, Wikipedia is your friend for all these things, for all the listeners, for all two of you out there.
That was one of those odd bits of knowledge that, like, I named a group after that group that I like brought people together to basically do what we're doing. Like, this has always been my thing, is trying to find people to talk to.
And fun fact, did you know that in order to keep he wasn't an elitist by any means, but he didn't want to dilute the club as far as just like people wanted to like bring a bunch of people in and have like basically like smart people apprenticeships. And he's like, that's going to get real messy real fast. Here's what we're going to do. He basically MLM'd the club. He's like, John, start your own learn from those people, bring it back to this one, and tell us. So it was like smart guy espionage in like wholesome terms.
Mhm.
Very funny. But yeah, like that's something that I like to teach my music students, because music is performing, and performing therefore makes you nervous, and nervousness or scared. Even a lot of kids are legitimately scared to perform and be in the spotlight in that way. And one way that I have found helps combat that is curiosity, because nothing bypasses fear like just needing to know how it's going to go, because that's really what it is. Our fear stems from the unknown. So if you can twist that and want to know, which we do, humans want to know because that's safety. If we know something, we feel safer because that gives us control, over what we know.
Mhm.
So if you know a fact, you can work around that or use it or whatever you have to do. That's why knowledge is power, right? You can, once you know something, you can then make moves around that, because it's all about control.
Turning the unknown into a positive.
Yeah, that's really it, is curiosity. So rather than like, I hope nothing bad happens, because that's really what we're, all clammed up about. It's, well, let's see what happens. I wonder what's going to happen when I do this. Take a more scientific approach. There's a webcomic out there, XKDC, I think it's like Stick People comics.
Mhm.
That's been around for a while. And it's a big red button on a pedestal, and it's 2 panels. It's, or it's 4 panels, I guess. But the first caption is regular people. The guy presses the button. He gets like struck by lightning. He goes, I should never do that again. Scientists, hits the button. I wonder if it does that every time. And that's some sort of life lesson in there. But again, the scientist is curious, right? Like, he
Mhm.
bypasses the fear of being shocked by wondering if it shocks you every time.
Hmm. I think it's a bit of gold there.
I do try. Yeah. One thing that, like, if you have the capacity to teach other people, do it, because you learn so much in trying to explain how to think about things, how to do all that.
Having to teach a kid the English language makes me have a very different relationship to the English language. Yeah, that's a B. It's a buzz sound. That's a C. We'll get back to that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I can't imagine.
It's
C is K, but I thought K was K. Well,
no. They see it's ka and sa and cha.
right. How do you know? You just kind of know.
It also upsets me that like people that make some of the kids' books, I feel like are lazy. Back to like the existential angst of wanting to do stuff. It's like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, C for chicken and clock. Chicken? Chicken's the fucking word you use. I can't be like, oh, it's k, like a class sound, which is, K, but which I get is confusing. But chicken? Or it's there was one for S and it's like shell or something. I'm like,
hmm
you're introducing like letter combinations when I'm just trying to work on the alphabet sounds here.
that's true. That is true. Do you use chicka chicka boom boom? I think I remember that one being useful.
I don't want to talk about that after the podcast because I'm not
Yeah,
about to
yeah, that's
devolve
fine.
into.
That's fine. You're
Um,
right.
but no, see, my thing is though, I'm switching back. Ben Franklin was
hmm
not like do the path thing. Like, and this is where like I think that you can have like a Taoist approach to the uh like not the obsession with the now, right? Because like that's my thing. Everyone like the wisdom is like just do your life, all that type of stuff. And there's ways that can play out very well for people. Um, but I think what separates the two categories that I'm talking about is the one is to find satisfaction in the now, basically at all times. Like you might not be happy, but you find a way to like pull that satisfaction out of it versus the other group which is the divine dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those are the people that make like moves happen, right? It's not that they do accomplish as a person. They make things, they move things through this divine dissatisfaction.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at these people. All the people that we see as like giant, like entire movements, have changed our perception of things, or changed the political or social landscape. All these like giant movers, very, very, very broken people. not not happy. They were not happy in the like personal sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, satisfied, right? Because like you see great people, like one of the first people that comes to mind is Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill had a wonderful time. Happy. I mean,
He didn't
like,
remember any of it.
yeah. Yeah, it's the like happy in the sense of like satisfied. No, but he would tell a terrible story with the same kind of giddiness he would another one, which is the kind of like living in the now thing. It's like, yeah, that was terrible. Like,
Yeah. Yep. It's true. Yeah. And so you just kind of, you don't want to, it's interesting because you don't want to choose. We idolize these people a lot of the time, which I think is problematic in many ways.
mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to choose that life. Those people didn't choose to be unhappy, barring perhaps Teddy Roosevelt. He was unhappy, and he chose to challenge himself in order to find the strength to be unhappy.
And again, you keep saying unhappy. That's not the good word. They weren't satisfied.
You're right. I should really switch the
Like
word.
that's the thing is like they could just never be. The now wasn't enough ever. Mm-hmm. Like they could be living in the now, right? Like, example with Teddy Roosevelt. Like if you put him out in the forest, he would just every tree, every leaf, every whoosh of the winds, every bird chirping, he'd be there. And he'd get back and be like, how do I keep more forest around? Like,
it's true.
Like it's just it's not enough is the difference. It's the true living in the now thing is like this is enough. And the difference with the two camps is the never enough. Mm-hmm. And you trade your peace for that capacity for the grander thing.
It's true. Yeah. And that can be micro or macro. Again, I come from the music world, and there's this famous story. Jascha Heifetz, one of the most famous violinists of all time, after a concert, a student, an audience member who was a student comes up. Oh, Maestro, I would give my life to play like you do. I think I've told you this. Yeah. Yep. And the maestro leans in and goes, I have, Mm-hmm. That's especially in developing any sort of skill, right? Like
this is, I think the little bit you just did is really important is the oddities, the exceptions, the outliers. That's the like modern pop term. The outliers get idolized. None of those people chose that. Like that is one of the things that people are like, oh, I want to be this. You've missed the point. Like what you say is I want to be this, and you realize other people have done similar things. Then you say I want to be like, but you already have to have had that internal drive, that
right,
whatever that is. Because if you, as a normal person, like with a normal temperament, when I say normal, we'll talk about like temperament. Try to do that, it will break you. Like the only reason those people do that thing is because they can't function any other way. Yeah, and they could, but they would run into exactly the problem I'm having, where it's like I could just make mead, do this podcast, whatever, and it goes where it goes. And every day I'm happy to be alive. Sure, I've studied enough philosophy, done enough meditation that I have a switch that I can like flick. And for a while I had it on that type of thing where I was just kind of into it. I was like, okay, but there's an edge I'm missing. And the only reason that edge is important to me is to help more people. I need that edge. As soon as I flipped it, the fucking highs and lows kick back in. but but so did the creativity, right? Like
Hmm.
and the motivation to like I have to do this. The I don't care how miserable I am. I don't care how busy I am. I will find a way.
Yeah,
Um, so
it's reminiscent of the reason the Dalai Lama exists in Tibetan Buddhism is that that particular Buddha, who like the founder of Tibetan Buddhism or whomever,
mhm.
you know, that particular Buddha foregoes nirvana. Like the whole fucking point is to achieve enlightenment, and that person foregoes it so that he purposefully gets reborn, so that he can constantly serve more and more people.
Which, to be honest, the logical thing within that philosophical system is to do that because the other thing is selfish. Duh. What? And to be fair, Buddha talks about that. He's like, if your goal is enlightenment, you've missed it.
Right. To the mountaintop with you. Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that the funny part? Oh, it's a whole thing. And I mean, we're all searching for. I'm tired of talking about like we're all searching for meaning all the time. Because I mean, read Viktor Frankl if you really want to like think about this hard. You know, Man's Search for Meaning is the literal title of the book. And his whole thing is, it's cliche now, but it's because he wrote it. It's, you know, you can, what's the like phrase? He didn't write this, but the common phrase is, you know, you can weather any what if you have a why or something
Hmm.
like that. Or you find a how if you have a why, that kind of stuff. So, like, he survived two of the Nazis' worst concentration camps uh, because at the time he was on the train going to the first one, before he knew that's where he was going, um, the Nazis took his manuscript for his book on psychology, and his whole thing was, well, I need to stick around so I can finish that book. I need to rewrite the book. Like that was kind of his one kernel of like, I need to do this, you know.
Hmm.
So he was not the path type necessarily, or was it a path? I'm trying to
No,
remember.
no. See that to me that's the opposite, right? Because the path
Right.
type would not be that, right? Because that's a destination, right? That's
Hmm.
a thing you're latching onto.
Yeah.
If you want to make it sound good for both, it's path or vision. Like
Hmm.
it's not necessarily a goal per se. Especially when you talk about like Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was like, oh, I want to start a new country. Like that was never part of the thing. But as
No.
things started happening, he's like, you know, it'd be fucking cool.
Right. Yeah.
And then he'd obsess over it, which is the difference, right? Because he's giving up his peace for that obsession. Benjamin
It's
Franklin,
true.
though, is an A class and balancing both because
Yeah.
he could not be phased as he got older. He was like the accept your death thing, right? Where he's kind of like
Right. No, it's true. Yeah,
he
he's an
slept with
interesting
too
study.
many aristocrats' wives to be afraid of death.
And the funny, yeah, and the funny thing is, um, he was kind of a social chameleon of sorts because he didn't do that. I mean, I'm sure he had fun, but like he didn't do that because that's necessarily who he was.
Hmm.
He did it because that was French society. He was the ambassador to France for a brand new fucking country. So you better make nice with the French
Hmm.
if you want to survive. So he did. He, you know, he. It's the total when in Rome
Yeah,
situation. French society was, yeah, everyone's kind of sleeping around, and you know, it's all part of the court intrigue and blah blah blah. So
oh,
he
well,
leaned into that
yeah.
to
Well,
like,
he like put on
yeah,
Casanova mask, and he's like, "Well, look what a character I am." Because
mm-hmm.
he came back to the states, and he's like, "Man, I didn't wake up at 6 a.m. today. What a bitch."
It's true. And his you know, his autobiography is, it's somewhat meandering, like he's telling stories about his history and stuff like that, but then there's the real gold of his autobiography, which is he lays out his routine for his general routine. Obviously it changes, you know, depending on circumstance, but you know, one of the biggest parts of his routine was he wakes up and he thinks about the day. He not like a general like, I'm going to achieve this and this and this. I'm sure he had that, but just time blocks of like contemplate what good I'm going to do today. That was his big thing. What good can I accomplish today?
And see, that's the vision group versus the path group, right? Because if you're living in the now, you don't think about that. You're like, I'm going to just do good. It's
Right.
different. And both of them, like the big philosophical wisdom thing, is it removes your ego. Because if you were just a part of what's happening, there's no you. It's this happens, I'm just a part of this. And the other one is you basically sacrifice your identity to the vision.
Mm-hmm. Which, yeah. And again, he straddled the line very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he would, one big thing that I think would help, especially in the face of existential anxiety, is we don't reflect enough. Because there's the common, I think there's a pop psychology notion going around of, anxiety is caused by us being worried about the future, and depression is caused by us being worried about the past. That's a super general. I don't agree with that necessarily, but it's an easy way to grasp the concept of those two things, at least. If anything starts us thinking about it, I'm for it. But we have to go deeper. Don't leave it there.
And I would say people that don't have clinical anxiety or clinical depression,
Correct.
It's often the case that if you have symptomatic depression, your symptomatic depression is linked to what you have or haven't done, or what you're going to do. Yeah, you can break it pretty well in many cases for practical use into those.
Correct. Absolutely. And I think that something we need to try and remember to do, especially to combat this kind of anxiety, is to reflect on the day or the week or just the past hour. Who cares? Reflect, think back, and really look at yourself. Like, we're all doing better than we think we are. But we just constantly feel like we're failing. This was something that I really had to come to terms with in music school, because your lessons, your practices, your rehearsals, it's all of it is geared towards, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We got to get better. Got to get there.
And we're going to make a point here. You said everybody. If you're trying, you're doing better than you think you are. Because people that don't try, it's it is the cliche of parenting, where it's like, I worry I'm not a good dad. It's like, okay, or I'm worried I'm not a good mom. It's like, that's the first step that you're at least on this line, like on this side of the line. Like, you're probably not bad because you worry about that. Because there's people that don't worry about that, and they're usually the worst ones.
It's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah, we throw the term like narcissism around too much.
Yeah,
but,
no, I've met
yeah,
at least one, at least one for sure, maybe two actual narcissists. Because there's narcissistic tendencies, and then there's narcissist. And one of the key tells of a narcissist is they inevitably come across that they're like, oh yeah, that's me, and they own it.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the thing. Yeah, they own everything. Everything is.
They're like, yeah,
everything.
They're like, yeah, I'm delusional, but that's because I'm a narcissist. You see,
right? And they just, they're just constantly wanking all the time. Anyways, so we need to reflect more, because, and don't just, we complain too much. We simply do. We complain too much. I was scrolling through any social media. Most of it is in the negative category of, I don't like this. This is stupid. That person's stupid. I'm making fun of this, which is sometimes, negative. Even comedy, there's not a whole lot of like positive comedy.
Well, okay, there's a bunch of reasons for that. Our videos, when I'm in a shit mood, I'm just like, yeah, fuck it, I'm going to post, tend to do better.
Right, because misery loves company.
Sure, but I would find a way to try and separate that from complaining, because like I find myself complaining more, partly to be social, and it really upsets me.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. You just hit on something that I'm sure I was going to get around to that meandering wise, but you just hit it right in the center. Yeah. Again, misery loves company. Part of the reason we feel awkward, again, normal people, as in your disposition, we feel awkward talking about our good qualities and accolades, it feels like bragging to a lot of people,
Hmm.
is because that's not universal to everybody. Like it secretly is, because we're all good at something and we all do good things, in the micro level. But
Hmm.
like, it's hard to talk about because you don't want to make other people feel lower in any way, or you'd feel, or in the inverse of that, you don't feel that it's appropriate to put yourself higher. Like you don't deserve to put yourself higher. We hate ourselves a lot of the time. We really do. It's hard.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd be just as bothered by people all talking about how great things that they had going on were. I guess it'd be different if people were talking about how great situations that were out of their control were.
And that's just it though. Like, yeah,
Yeah, like,
because
oh,
there
this,
is such a thing as
like,
bragging.
boy, is it
Don't
cold,
get
but
me wrong.
man, are those trees pretty.
Right. And that's, yeah, there's a great Kurt Vonnegut lecture, or he's given a speech at something, and he talks about, I think it's his uncle, who his like one of his catchphrases was like, "Man, if this ain't nice, I don't know what is."
Yep, I remember that saying that quote
Yeah,
recently.
yeah, it's a wonderful thing. It's really nice because like, and I've started to just stop, shut the fuck up, and stop, and look at something. Goes, you know what? This is nice. Or you don't have to force it either. Notice when things are nice. I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
Mhm.
Like, not not everything is bad all the time. Yes, bad things are happening in the world right now. Right now, someone's dying. Someone is experiencing something terrible. Like, yes, it's happening. I can't do anything about that.
Well, I know a large demographic of people that disagree with you. Why isn't
Well,
our
what am I
profile?
supposed to?
Why isn't our profile picture a flag of some sort? Awareness creates change,
Yeah, I have many thoughts, and
but that's not for us.
yeah,
We do not do actively current event shit.
right.
That's none of my business.
What's right? It's the whole thing of like, we have to, the armor against this kind of anxiety, because half of it is, a lot of people I know are anxious because we are hyper aware of all the bad things going on that we can't control, or that we try to manage, but like it's definitely a wall of sand that we're trying to keep up. But the armor against that is really, you must acknowledge what is good. You must.
Okay, I
And
feel
you
like
don't have to bullshit. You don't have to bullshit though. Just acknowledge when something is good.
the trouble is again when we get to social demographics, because like
Yeah.
I think it's the good. The amount of benefit you will get in life from embracing the concept of gratitude, um, the thankfulness, like as far as like in the moment things, yeah. If I had to have three things, I could only ever give three lessons to the whole of humanity. Focus on gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
like would be one of the biggest ones. The change that will make is fucking phenomenal. And it's not an easy habit. Simple, not easy.
Yep.
Um,
And
but
it's
like
gonna feel like you're gaslighting yourself. It's gonna feel insincere at some point. Or
no, I would
for
disagree.
people who aren't used to it, or not getting the concept, like if you really just focus on negative stuff and you try to focus on positive things, it's gonna feel fake.
Positive, see the different positive things. Gratitude, right? You don't have to focus
Okay.
on like because it'll feel dumb is what it'll feel. It'll feel foolish
Yeah.
and stupid. Because like if you
Little
keep a
like, yeah.
gratitude journal and you're like every day I'm gonna write three things, you might have a shit day. It's like, oh, nothing feels good. It's like, did the sun come up today? Well, yeah, but I couldn't see it. Did it come up? Well, the Earth was here. It sounds stupid, but just that simple shift, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be positive, right? Because it's like, oh, well, the sun was behind the clouds. Like being like, oh, well, the sun existed and the Earth existed. That's not necessarily a positive experience, but you can still be like, I guess that's nice. Like I'm writing this. Like everything else is terrible, but at least the terrible could exist at all. Like it's silly. So
It's true.
because yeah, with the positive thing, I would agree that if you try to do the positive thing, um, it can feel fake, but also we all know, at least with the access to social media, people who do that in a fake way where they're just
Hmm.
fucking chipper.
Yeah,
And like you could, like, if you just hit them in the heel, the emotional heel, that'll all crumble.
that's a great analogy. I like that.
But
Oh,
my thing is in relation to like the conversation thing. This kind of ties into the existential angst thing. Is a lot of
hmm.
people avoid that angst, and it's one of the things I kind of write about, and just in passing in the Substack. Um, and this is always my thing. Is like, understandably so. Like, the world would be a better place if more of us went through these types of things. But I also understand choosing to suffer is, not great. Um, but so when we talk about conversation, right, it's much easier to complain about the world or other people or these shitty things going on in your life. But if you're like, yeah, I'm trying to do this thing to be better, right? Like if you try to not focus on positives, right? You're not just like, oh, how sunny it is today, right? Because yeah, that might feel just kind of like out of place. You're like, yeah, like I don't know, I'm trying to save up money for this, da, da, da. Like it. What I've realized through observation, um, is what you're asking somebody is to recognize responsibility. And if somebody is consciously or subconsciously trying to avoid personal life responsibility, you're hitting a spot that like will not resonate well. So yeah, I'm taking responsibility. And part of the thing is like they think like, okay, well, fucking good for you. Like some of us, and then spiral, whatever. Or they
It
just flat out
is,
ignore you.
yeah, it is very internal. Yeah, and like we know this. Like we talk about, oh, anytime someone makes fun of you or whatever, it's a self reflection thing that they're
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Sounds like a them
Um,
problem.
yeah, really, 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 like truly, it is. Um, and like, how do you combat that? Like, I'm not sure, to be honest. That's what we're trying to figure out. Because
If
that's the
there's a
thing. It is a lot of it is the crabs in a bucket effect of like one crab tries to get lifted out or tries to go out, and the rest will claw it back down.
there's, there's a way to do it. It's just like so many things. It takes effort. Like that's the thing, is it's so much easier to not walk the path of, I don't know. We need to start finding our own. One of these days, you and I are going to sit down and come up with words that work for these.
Yeah.
Uh, Not like enlightenment or woke, whatever. But it takes more effort to be conscious in that way. Um,
Or what are the philosophers called? The philosophists. Right living. Yeah.
yeah. Um, there's a way to do it. One, because you have people like Benjamin Franklin, or for those who know Albert Pike. When people wrote about him, like there's a like uh, so where Albert Pike wrote a freaking tome of philosophy, that references countless thousands of other philosophical works and mythological writings and whatever. So he was, a thoughtful guy, but his general thing was how pleasant he was, like as a person, like which meant that like he was able to interact. So there's a way to do it, um, and I think it has to come from a genuine care. It doesn't have to, but like that's the easiest way. Is attached to a genuine care of like this person might be talking about negative things, but like I want to understand the compassion. I guess compassion is
Hmm.
the key thing, and finding ways to interact through that compassion. It's not easy because you have to identify it and then develop the skill. Um, Something we talked about earlier
Yeah.
made me think of a story, but just an example of like Albert Pike. Back when you had to mail everything, he was traveling and like nobody heard from him, so they assumed he was dead and threw a funeral for him. And he showed up as the funeral was happening. So he walked in and like leaned over to one of the guests. He's like, awfully rude of me to be late to my own funeral. Like, well, so there's a way to
Love it.
do it, but it definitely takes effort, because not only do you have to have your own thing in order to some degree,
Hmm.
So you don't give in to it or you don't regress or whatever it is. But then you have to take that skill, combine it with compassion to connect in that way. And again, it's one of those things where it's like I the I feel like the world would be a better place with that kind of thing, but I also understand asking somebody like, okay, so first feel miserable about everything you're failing at and all the things you're doing wrong and your place in the world. Dig yourself out of that and then figure out how to deal with people who are still stuck in there, but don't be all fucking nose in the air. And I'm
That
guilty
makes
of
it
it.
worse.
Yeah,
That makes it worse.
I'm
Yeah.
guilty of having that phase. I'm
Hmm.
still judgmental, but understanding, right? Because like,
Yeah.
and I'm working on the judgmental part because I've realized that it's that compassion element of it. Um,
Yeah. Well, that's why, you've mentioned that about me, really. And I've naturally been pretty predisposed to meet people where they're at.
mhm.
Um, and I have recognized that. That's the thing about talent and um, building a skill, right? Uh, I have the talent, if you want to call it that, of like just being a very personable guy. I can just kind of meet someone at their level of emotional maturity and intelligence and all that. Maybe not intelligence, but emotional maturity.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I then went, oh, this is something I can use. But if I were just the same person like that all the time, if I didn't like learn how to really develop communication skills, uh, I would just be some bro, like just some dude. Like, oh yeah, that's Matt. He's a nice guy, but like, there's not much there, you
Mhm.
know. uh, so I studied how to better talk to people, and that's part of the reason I'm obsessed with word choice. And to bring in the existential angst thing, I, or maybe it's just general anxiety, like I am averse to confrontation. I'm not very good at it. Uh, at least personal confrontation.
Mhm.
I can mediate confrontation because it's not directed at me. There's a difference. So I'm comfortable with heated things if it's not like if I'm removed one step from it. But when it's me having to like break up with somebody or have that talk, uh, that's why I'm obsessed with learning this stuff. It comes from a place of fear, to be honest. I'm obsessed with learning that stuff and finding the right word. If I just had the right word, it would not hurt anyone's feelings. It would like make everything. It would
Well,
make me understood without hurting anything.
well, according to AI theory, you don't even need the right word. You just need the right letters in the right sequence, and it'll sound great.
Interesting. Is that like the infinite monkeys on infinite typewriters
Mhm.
scenario?
But it's AI's work on a language model that's letter by letter. So they'll type a paragraph that's like, oh, this makes so much sense. The AI is only thinking letter to letter. But so there is something to that sense of like if I had the right words, and of course with language there's like tonality and stuff like that. But like there's this,
Correct. Yeah.
I I definitely get into that conversation regularly enough where
Yeah.
it's the oh, like people are so unique and so different. I'm like, okay, one, people get paid for marketing, so you're wrong. And
It's true.
advertising, worse than anything, advertising. Um, but also, it's like the whole universe has to be scientific. Like it has to be, unless miracles are true. And I, to be clear, reject the concept of miracles on the very premise of them. So there is that right thing, which ultimately ties into like the angst that I struggle with. Is like there is a right way to like spend my day, to interact with people. Like I think about that. Like on every fucking day, I think about like how can I get closer to that right way.
When
But
you talk about the right way, is this the same as being optimal? Is there an optimal day?
yeah, and I guess that might be a better, not right in the like moralistic or yeah, that type of sense. But like there's a way for me to like interact with people where I'm going to have the most optimal. Yeah, right. Optimize it. I don't like the optimize term because it's too based on efficiency, where I think there's
We do tie those words together a lot. I was just thinking that. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, it's not about an efficiency so much as it is an impact
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
towards.
Optimal is just fill the entire spectrum, right? That's optimal.
Mhm.
Efficiency is like quickest route from A to B.
No,
So
quickest while maintaining the most impact. Like the key thing about
yeah.
efficiency is it is the most impact in the least amount of time, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not just the least amount of time because that'd be quickest.
Yeah, I suppose.
But no, my whole the what I've realized, like struggling and talking to people that are close to me, is my angst ultimately comes from this sense of vision. And sense of vision translates into me being like, there's a right way to achieve that result, not in the sense of like, oh, we have to do it this way or have to do that, whatever. It's science, right? I guess it's like I approach it as science, where it's like, if we did this set of things, the result, even if it's just probability, right? The probability of this result being good is, instead of being 10-20%, if we didn't do this ingredients of activities, it goes from 10-20% to 60-70%. So
Mm-hmm.
we should do that. Like, so, and I think about that with everything, like the way I talk to people, the way I wake up in the morning. And ironically, I have, bad habits, the nicotine and stuff like that because of that, where part of me knows like I'd probably get better sleep and have more energy. You balance out what you can.
Well, that's just the thing. We are. I've said this for years now. We are logical creatures, right? But we are emotional beings first.
Mhm.
Like emotion developed before logic in our brains, and that is stronger. Emotion is way stronger than logic. Like it's obvious when you like see it and observe it, but that's the whole point, is that it's not obvious in the moment internally to us. So you have to tie it in with emotion, which is probably where a lot of anxiety in general comes from, right? We tie our actions to emotions, or inactions to emotions. And to kind of lean on what you're feeling, that causes us to freak the fuck out. Like, because we all want the best way to do something, usually. And first of all, fuck the fitness and diet industry, because every way seems to be the best way. So therefore, we're just, confused.
The best way is the way that you'll stick to.
And that's the thing. Like, we're logical, but it's hard to just be logical. If we were just logical, Star Trek covered this with the Vulcans, right? They're supposed to be a purely logical species,
Mm-hmm.
or peoples, but they still have issues. And Spock is interesting because he's half human, right? So he has
Mm-hmm.
more emotion. Yeah.
But Data's such a better character. 100% logical being, trying to be as human as possible. Next Generation.
Comedy gold. Yeah.
I respect the original Star Trek for what it is. It was groundbreaking, but I'll take Picard and Data over Kirk and Spock any day. Any day.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that actually reminds me of a point I wanted to make was, I mentioned it before, where, good artists borrow and great artists steal. And you steal something in order to use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the whole point. Or, we steal items to sell them, but that's using it in its way. Anyways, artists steal in order to use what they steal.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to feel like you're doing that. But I'm trying to make sure I try to lay this out in a logical way. A lot of original thinkers, or I'm reading all these autobiographies and just histories of people. I screamed I hate history before, but I do love history quite a lot. Satire. But it's the like, oh, these people walked so we could run type situation.
On the
Like,
shoulders of giants and all that.
yeah, you're encouraged to learn from other people's mistakes. You're encouraged to use the knowledge. Like, you don't have to train yourself. You don't have to come up with Newtonian physics. Newton did that for you.
Mhm.
Take it, use it. That's what Einstein did. Like,
Well,
Einstein did not. He challenged it. He definitely challenged Newtonian physics.
yeah, I was gonna say, if you want to break it, break it.
Yeah, but you have to learn it. Like, you have to
Well,
really
yeah,
absorb yourself.
yeah, the mastery is learning all the rules and then learning that you don't have to use them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to
Learning
know
when they
them
apply.
first before you understand how to break them.
Yeah. I know. I think about this constantly. Where, yeah,
Jazz.
to be excellent, to be an expert. There's a difference. To be an expert is to know all the rules. To be a master is to know all the laws.
Hmm.
And that's, yeah, right. Like, that's a much more concise way of it. But and there are differences for sure. Because a master, like, the rules are whatever. You use, it's all situational, right? But there's certain laws, that physics essentially, forces upon us in any art or any skill or
Well,
any
and
situation.
you can be told those, but you will not understand them till you experience it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason Einstein developed his theories was he imagined himself experiencing the laws of physics. Like, he imagined a man on, like, a train going the speed of light. And if he were to go faster, then all light would just disappear because light is one speed.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Which
but
is fucking wild.
Had that, right, yeah. First of all,
Yeah. So yeah, but back to the overthinker thing, right? Because again, that's the divine dissatisfaction, right? That's the visionary. Because like that's if you're just trying to enjoy your day, picturing that is not helping you in the now in that sense. Because then what do you do with
No.
that? Angst.
Right. Well, that's just it. And then that's where like, Ben Franklin, again, such a great example of all this stuff, is like, he figured, like, say Ben Franklin figured out the speed of light. He didn't, but say he did. He would probably find a way to be like, okay, well then, if we position mirrors at certain points in the city and all that kind of stuff, he might have accidentally invented street lamps, or like more efficient street. Who knows?
Mm.
I'm just pulling stuff out of my ass, but like,
Well, that's why he gets so much credit for electricity, is he got got his kid shocked. It's like, oh, it conducts, it moves through like a liquid. Interesting. Like,
right.
And he didn't invent the wires, the phone, like he didn't invent any of this stuff, but he like what was the first person to be like, we could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a current, like this is a
Mm-hmm.
a thing we can harness. It's not like a separate thing.
And so I will always assert that an antidote, maybe not the antidote, but an antidote to fear is curiosity.
I think that's...
But it must be tied to action. It has to be tied to action. You must do something with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just sound advice. I'm trying to think how that like plays out. I guess conceptually, but I will just leave it at that. Yeah.
Right.
Curiosity followed by action. But
yeah, and and the other part is, we can talk about confidence in ourselves and in certain things. Talk about mastery again. Masters are humble because they know that they don't know a lot of things. Like, that's just a state of being for them a lot of the time. Is like, I have a lot of knowledge, I have a lot of skill, I know that I am a blip on the radar of overall,
they might be a
capability.
humble human, but they might not be humble in their chosen field.
Right, because they're very confident in the skill they have developed.
Mm-hmm.
They just know that there's more that they could do.
Mm-hmm.
They know there's not a cap to it. And I always talk about, again, with performers, right? True confidence, real confidence in yourself, is not the belief that you will not make a mistake. That is not confidence. That's delusion. True confidence is knowing that if a mistake happens, you can handle it, right? You will survive it. That's really all it is. Maybe not even fix the mistake. That's not even what I'm talking about. It's you will survive anything that happens. That's real confidence. You'll be fine. Like people talk about that in game, in like picking up women and things like that. Real confidence in that is the ability to get rejected and know that you're going to be fine.
Which, to like, just because the red pill sphere is such a big thing, just to dabble into the current event stuff, like early pickup archery, one of the things is like it was trying to get rid of the creepy upset guy, right? Like the guy that approaches you and then you reject him, like it's upset. Like game theory, like pickup artist stuff would have been like that's a terrible person. Like the pickup artist is supposed to walk up and be like, "Hey girl," and she's like, "Fuck you, I don't want to talk to you." Be like, "Okay, just throw this out there. Seems like you're having a bad day. If I could make you laugh, would that be worth something?" It's like, "No, I want to just talk out with my friends." Cool. Hope your day gets better. And then you walk away because it's not important to you. Like one of the things you're taught in the early like school systems is the whole, like, it's the reason the importance of the field, right? Like go out. Your goal isn't to get laid. Your goal is to talk to as many, like this is, people make it some mystical thing where it's like, oh, like how to get laid. It's like the first step is go out and talk to as many strangers as possible, walk home and write down like, how did that feel? And then it's like, oh, it was uncomfortable.
Reflect.
Yeah. How did that feel? It's like, oh, it was uncomfortable. Okay. Newsflash. If you want to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, you're going to keep doing that until you can do it comfortably. Like step one. But that means
I've said it at least like 300 times today. Repetition is the mother of all skills. Full stop.
Well, and then reflection. That's the thing, right? Because it's because people get into like bad habits or get into not even bad habits, just a way of living that isn't moving them in I guess like a growth or progress way. And that's one of those things where it's like, from an individual standpoint, and this is my bigger picture with the angst thing, and I guess my case for myself for having it, it's like asking people to do that, like just live, try to be a good person, like all that type of stuff. It sounds nice. Wars happen partly because of that almost complacency. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with it, but it's the not being willing to sacrifice yourself for the bigger picture allows people who are willing to sacrifice to make bad things happen. So I get stuck where it's like everyone should be able to live like hobbits in the Shire, but if Bilbo and Frodo hadn't gone off on adventures, right, like there'd be no Shire.
Right.
So I don't know if it's either.
The Shire even gets taken over. Like even when they save the fucking world, the Shire still gets taken over by Saruman, because in the books he doesn't die. He actually flees. And he actually like takes over the Shire. It's a fun little side quest. And I think the 4 hobbits have to like, they do like the Popeye thing. They roll up their sleeves and like, you motherfucker, like.
But I wonder if like more people need to experience that, or if we need more heroes and not saviors, right?
I'll say this. Growth and healing are uncomfortable. Right? Like if you think about even a physical wound, like you have a scar, right? When that scar heals, it is not a blissful, pleasant, spa type, feeling. It's knitting flesh. It's growing and knitting flesh.
That's just puberty. Like, just puberty. Puberty is uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. Your body's doing all sorts of shit. Like, think about it. Like trees, the way trees grow and the way we grow. We'll talk about that in Norse mythology. They have a affinity for trees because they see trees as kinship. Anyways,
That's gonna be a good one.
it is, yeah. But like like you don't have to do this, but like if you want to, like if you stretch your hands, like that's how a tree feels all the
Oh yeah,
because
we've
it's
talked.
growing. That's what growing feels
We've
like.
talked about this where I was like, I hear hippies talk about trees and stuff. I'm like, okay, to do the Einstein like imagine being on a train thing. It's like if you actually imagine being a tree, that's what you feel. What you feel is this ache
Mm-hmm.
all the time.
Right.
But
And
it's
yeah,
the
you get the warmth of the sun and the water, infusing you in all that. But
well,
like growing in general is that kind of stretch ache feeling.
but the sweet spot is it's the line where pleasure and pain meet. So it's
Mm-hmm. It's that stretch, right? That big stretch that we all do. Big stretch, and it
I,
feels great, but there's that line where it could go too far.
the two actual closest things are either when you're working out, like real intense working out, or being intimate, and things that normally like would just straight up hurt don't, right? Like those are the two where it's like it's not just
Sure.
the stretching, it's the in another situation, right? If you were having to lift a box and you weren't intending to lift something that heavy, it would hurt more than feel good. But if you're doing it on
Right.
purpose, same thing with the intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the aligning yourself, which is part of why we're doing this episode. Like from personal selfishness, is I'm trying to align myself more to that growth.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And we
I've
just
been
have to.
I've been
to
complaining about it.
understand.
It's
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I want to lean into it.
Right, and that's just it. People need to choose what fucks to give, as Mark Manson talks about in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. The art of not giving a fuck. To sum up the whole fucking book, the art of not giving a fuck is giving a fuck in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's partially where this existential anxiety
Well, it's when you
comes
don't
from,
know
is we
where to
right,
put that.
we feel the responsibility to give a fuck about everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Not even that we do give a fuck about everything. We feel the responsibility, the pressure to give a fuck about everything. And
That's one of the first steps. Like
impossible.
you don't give a fuck about everything, or you give a fuck about selfish things, and you open yourself up, and all of a sudden, yeah, it's I could give a fuck about everything, because it's one of those ironic things where I will pick up trash when I'm going for a walk, but I throw recycling in the garbage because I'm like it's gone. Like I don't trust the system to disperse between the two, right? Like
I've seen what happens, and they all go to the same place. Like,
yeah, I'd rather the garbage not be out like on the streets and in the parks. Something that maybe would be processed into recycling. I don't know if it's going to be. So as far as I'm concerned, I'd rather it all in the dump where it's supposed, like where we
right.
collectively
well, it's
put
definitely not getting recycled in the middle of the fucking sandbox. So yeah,
Yeah.
we choose the lesser of two evils if that's the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it is a lot about that, and just understanding that healing and growth is not a comfortable thing. It doesn't have to hurt by any means, but hurt is often a catalyst for healing and growth. But it's not a comfortable thing. It's itchy and stretchy and like achy, and it's all those things mentally and emotionally as well. But there comes a point where there is a line you cross where things suddenly start happening for you and to you in a good way.
And the point when you can, people have been shitting on the ice bath bros thing a lot more recently. And I did watch somebody make the joke of like these guys with their morning routines, like who the fuck is raising the kids? Like they act like they're family men, but they're gone for 3 hours every morning, just like, and then I meditate and I write and I sauna
Right.
and I like
Yep.
legitimate criticisms, but like everybody would benefit unless you have some health condition that doesn't allow you to take ice baths or cold showers, but everybody would benefit from it because it never doesn't suck. But there's a point when you turn it into a habit and you're looking forward to it. in the sense of like doing it. Like you're not looking forward to being cold and shivering and having to like grit through it. But you know that like, okay, once it goes, like I'm ready for the I'm ready for the suck.
Yeah,
And that translates to a lot of the other experiences.
exactly. And what you're describing is what I call the yellow zone in my own
Yeah, we
thing.
talk
So
about that in one of the early episodes.
do we? Yeah, yeah. So real quick recap. Think of like basically a target, an archery target of a green center. That's your comfort zone. It gradients into a yellow
Oh,
ring.
we didn't talk about it as a target. We talked about it as layers, right? So you start
Yeah.
like with green, yellow,
Either way,
red.
yeah.
Well, just because
Either way, it could
if
be
you imagine putting in the effort, because like if you're trying to do the effort, like you're aiming.
Mhm.
So there's 3 layers, like big bottom green,
Yeah.
very comfortable, yellow, uncomfortable, red is what we hit and burnt out.
That's just it. But you have to know, you have to find where those are, right? That's so important. I mean, I'm not a David Goggins like super fan, but he did say something at one point that I'm like, I didn't like to hear it, but I was like, yeah. He's like, motherfuckers are always scared of overtraining. It's like you got to train to overtrain. Like you gotta you have to train in order to find. You have to know where that line is. You have to find it, and hopefully not to the point where it's like I've just so many things bouncing around right now. But to finish, what I'm saying is, green is our comfort zone, and we want that to grow. Sorry, we want that to grow. We want that to expand upwards, and because we want more stuff to be in our comfort zone within our capabilities. Yellow is like the sweet spot of challenging enough that you can do it, probably.
with effort and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging enough that you can probably do it. I always equate it to video games. It's a boss that you can beat, but like stock up on the health potions, like make sure you can. It's going to be challenging. It might be a buzzer beater, where both of your health is really low and you have to just do the one hit that finishes it before he finishes his. And red is like you walked into the area of the map that's like way over leveled. Like you're level 1, you made it to the red area of the map where the fucking hobgoblin will just take your face off.
And no amount of trying again is going to make that work. You have to go back and grow.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, it's as simple as that. Not easy. I need that on a t-shirt,
We will do merch. I just need 30. Support the Patreon. Once we hit over 30 a month, we can get the merch stuff live again.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah. But yeah, so that is how we combat angst. It's funny, I'm trying really hard. I'm talking about word choice again. Because I need to find the right word to have the right impact. It's just a compulsion of mine. But I have a student. She's a female musician, and I'm not sure if that's relevant or not, but I feel like it is. But she is trying to develop her confidence in her technique, and she logically knows what she needs to do. She's having a hard time overcoming that hurdle. And I have found that using kind of more testosterone-driven language is not useful to her. It doesn't quite compute with her. So I'll talk about you have to attack it and combat it and fight it. More aggressive things like that. Aggressive terminology.
Put on your armor, grab your sword, and slay that dragon.
Pretty much, like it just doesn't quite land. Because she's just not that kind of aggressively extroverted type of doer, because you can be an introvert but have an extroverted method of doing something, if that makes any sense.
D&D, anybody?
Yeah, that or just like skill development, right? Like I'm an introvert, not in that I'm shy, but I just need to recharge by being by myself. When I play my instrument, I'm quite extroverted. Like I'm kind of a ham, like in a way. And I don't seek attention like that as a person. It's just when I play extroverted.
Yeah.
So, it's a whole thing. And part of that's because I studied martial arts. Like I am a combat oriented thinker, you know, and she is just simply not. So it's been a wonderful challenge for me to try and find more soft, I don't like using that term, but soft ways of doing that. I don't have to baby her. I can still tell her what's up and like where the level is
Yeah,
and where she
it's just
is.
it's a different flavor, I guess.
Right. She
Uh,
is not to be babied. Like she knows when I'm bullshitting.
Isn't
Like it's
that
not
unfortunate that? Because I was like, okay, well, we'll think about it like flavors. I was like, okay, there's hot, spicy. I was like, okay, but then you're gonna use terms like mild, sweet, soft. I was like, huh.
right.
It's
Right.
unfortunate that there's also have like when you talk about talking to a person or a person, yeah, that the patriarchy strikes again.
I love that. It's true. It's absolutely true. Yeah. Our language is very important. People say, "Oh, words are just a construct and blah blah." Yeah, because we're trying to get across meaning, and this is the best way we have right now. Like,
Hmm.
I can't connect my ponytail to yours. Like,
Well, it's just people need to be better with words.
hmm that's a big part of it. That's partially why I love. So, yeah, and it's funny how we always kind of morph into the like development sphere, but it's that's how we survive as individuals and as a species and all of that. Like to manage, to combat, or to manage, or to live with even the existential angst that a lot of us feel, you have to do something.
Hmm. I do feel like, yeah, we probably could have ended, like, if we're trying to just have an answer, me personally, and then, like, as a tackling this thing as a conversation, the
Mm-hmm.
the curiosity thing is the most important. And then, like, curiosity tied to action, right,
Yeah,
is the, like,
yeah,
full thing. But I,
yeah. And I tie it into personally. I tie it into skill development because I'm a musician, so that's a skill that I'm constantly trying to develop. So it's Miyamoto Musashi's thing: know one thing, or what is it? Learn one thing to know 10,000 things
mhm.
is a phrase of his. So it's I use the study of learning an instrument and mastering an instrument to understand a lot of other things because it's all relative. It's all examples of itself,
Mhm.
which is why I really advocate that people just try to get good at something. Doesn't really matter what it is. Just think about it as you do it and try to get better at it. Reflect. You do and reflect
Well,
and
yeah, the
just upward
fundamental
cycle that.
process for a human in relation to a skill of any sort is universal across human skills. And then the reason we get so big headed about our place in the universe is because then it translates to universal, like, concepts pretty well most of the time.
Yep. That's because, yeah, as you learn, as you gain mastery, you start to see the rules as arbitrary and you start to understand the laws that you're
Mm-hmm.
bouncing up against or hopefully using. Like the laws of physics are not our adversary, they are what we use,
Mm-hmm.
they are what we are. Yeah. So I think it's embracing, and we should be grateful for that, like embracing gratitude,
Gratitude
practicing
and
gratitude.
gratitude and curiosity.
Yeah. Like, you know, it's simple.
Yeah, gratitude, curiosity, and action. There we go. We've got our three things.
Yes. So is it, let's see, we'll call it CAG in that order because it starts with curiosity, which moves you hopefully to action, and action causes things to be grateful for. I don't know.
No, not buying that one. I would do
Well, we have a catalyst, right?
GCA. Make it just an
You think?
acronym. Well, yeah, because first you have, for from the self development standpoint, that if you need to
Mm-hmm.
calm your fucking self down before you have the space to be curious, gratitude first.
Yeah, yeah. It is a. I don't prescribe to a lot of Tony Robbins stuff, but there is one thing that I saw him do in a clip of some kind where there was a man who was like straight up suicidal, and he just like admits that, and Tony's like right there talking to him face to face, and he does this thing where he comments. He's like, "Are you suicidal because of your stupid red shoes?" Because he's wearing like red kicks or something.
Mm.
And the dude's like, "What?" Like it's just your shoes. They're kind of silly. I would be depressed wearing those shoes too. you know. And he didn't do it to like. He did it to have that like whiplash effect because he's stuck in the rut of.
Well, because he didn't want him, the person who's struggling with it, to lead the conversation of like, come into my world of suicide, right? My depression.
Right.
It'll pull him out.
And
Like,
he's
well,
stuck because he was stuck in that rut of suicidal depression, right? He just couldn't get himself out of it. We need help sometimes, right? Like community is so important. We are social beings. So what Tony did is kind of what you're talking about in a different lane, but the same direction with gratitude of it helps you kind of just like, snap out of it real quick so that you get the chance to step back.
Mhm.
So if you're feeling like shit, that sense of like, but you know what? I was able to put my shoes on without the back folding in on my heel and making me pissed off. Like,
yeah, like it can be stupid.
It is, yeah. Like I was able to put my shoes on the first try, like that's important.
And you can always find a thing.
It's true. It's true. You really can. And if you can't find a thing, find a person.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of
when I did it,
the amount of gratitude journal entries I have that are just, I'm thankful for my mom. I was like, whatever. It's a low-hanging fruit. I've said it a million times with these entries, but it's a thing that I will continue to like write down.
Mm-hmm. And you can be like, if that's something that people want to do, is like gratitude journaling or just notes. It can be as simple as like just bullet points. There's the bullet journal a lot of people use.
Yeah, I just did bullets. I would just do, just because it's about the habit of taking that
and
time.
That's the thing. You don't need to write a fucking essay on why you're grateful for this thing. Just say what you're grateful for.
And again, it doesn't, like, let's say you had like a really good bowl of food. You could just write the word food, right? Like we're not talking about optimization here. We're talking about the fitness thing, right? Where it's like the best thing is the one that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I should probably keep. I guess if anything, I should probably start keeping a journal again.
Yeah.
I for the most part, gotten good at the habit of it. But it's tough when you have the two pressures like fighting, the ability to put my mind into a gratitude mode, and then just like the angst and anxiety and pressure like pushing down. It's hard to like break through it without a habit.
You know what? You just mentioned something very important. We tend to fall into the trap, like the common theory, I guess, is that thought leads to action. But it's quite the other way around. Like we are what we do, right? As Aristotle supposedly said.
Mm-hmm.
We are what we do, right? You must, like, it can be totally disingenuous. Who cares? Do the thing, and your brain will, because we're logical beings, right? Your brain will find a way to make it make sense of why we're doing this.
And it's one of the reasons it's hard to like think your like way through things. And this just occurred to me as like okay, so like struggling, anxiety, depression, the angst and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna like uplift that with the gratitude. It's me pushing down and pushing up. So if you imagine like lifting a weight, like, so it's you pushing the weight down and then you trying to lift the weight up at the same time. So like, unless you can get like the jump on yourself, like the pressure thing, it makes it hard. You can't just, it's the reason addictions work the way they do. It's like, oh, I'm like, I'm going to quit today. And then you're also the person who's like, oh, but it sounds nice, right? Like that internal thing, the power is the same way.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
So externalizing with like a habit or an action tilts the scales.
Yeah. I am shit at working out, but I love making lists. I'm bad at completing, like doing what's on the list. because I get the bump from making the list.
Mm.
I have worked out, barring yesterday because I was booked. I was bookend schedule wise, but so for 2 weeks straight, the first of the month through the 14th, I worked out every single day, like a good workout. Not because the habit was working out, but the habit was writing down what I did in the gym. Just logging what I did in the gym, making a list every day of what I did. And that has been gold for me. Because, like, I've tried just making the habit, I just have to get to the gym, or I just have to, stick to my plan of work, of what I do. All of it crumbles to me. But I love writing down what I did. And that's another reflection thing of here's what I've accomplished. Like, this is a lot. This is good. And it feels good to try and do more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I find a lot of joy in, like, how much can I accomplish in this? And, like, you learn to read yourself and be like, all right, I have done enough for now. Like, especially with something physical, there is that's a finite, resource in the moment. It needs time to recharge.
There's something binary about it. You just need to figure out a way to get it from 0 to 1. Like,
yeah,
from
absolutely.
Don't work out to work out. From like, you immediately go to the sweets versus you just say no to the sweet, right? Like, it can be switching from 1 to 0. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And even then, that's all on a gradient. I talk to my students about this all the time. I have studied skill development, like, obsessively. And I'm very passionate about it because one of my missions as a person, as a teacher, is to help other people get better at what they're doing. And to have the confidence to know they can do that. Mm-hmm. That it's not some mystical, talent is bullshit. Like, people you think that are just good at something, that's not a thing, you guys. That's not a thing. Like, yeah, you can be naturally predisposed for something, or, be okay at it in your immediate circle, right? Like, but the truly good people they built that.
Well, and to, like, tie it in with, like, kind of your language is, like, it's not that these people practice great every time, it's that they practiced every time.
Yes, and thank you for reminding me to jump back to my point. Was the point of practice is not to do it great, like you said. It's not to do it perfectly, it's not to do it great. It's to get better. That's it. Mm-hmm. Get better.
Well, and
the true greats of anything are not focused on being the best. They're focused on being better.
And back to the binary, if it's like, I'm not feeling it, like, like, you're going to practice and it's going to suck. Mm-hmm. You practice to practice, right? Then this is where people are like, oh, well, I don't feel like I'm going to be doing very well in my practice, so I'm not reaching that goal of being better. It's like, the act of practicing, it's my favorite thing that's, I constantly remind myself because I still struggle with it, but it's like, what makes somebody a writer? They write. There's all the, like, authors that have talked about that, where it's like, well, no, I don't bump out a masterpiece every time. I just sit down, force myself to be like, click buttons and make words appear. It's like, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, you just have to do it, right? You're a musician because you play. You're a magician because you, like, work on tricks. You're a writer because you write. Doesn't mean, like, whatever. But there's a binary. I guess tying in, like, I was just saying, tying in, like, there's curiosity and action sometimes as simple as the binary. You don't need to, like, have a workout. You can do a push-up. I know that sounds dumb, but, like, you do one push-up today. And if you have to just do one push-up every couple days, you're at some point going to get bored and be like, I'll do 2. Like, right? Like, you have to put yourself in the space for it.
Yep. And yeah, I love thinking in terms of, I'm not a huge fan of statistics all the time, but it is a nice little thing to be like, it's a little tongue in cheek, but very inspiring at the same time. If you do one push-up, that is 100% more push-ups.
Right. Yes.
Than not doing a push-up.
Uh-huh.
Like,
exactly.
And it seems silly, but, like, it's weirdly inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that gets lost easily.
Yeah. And it's tough because it's like, well, we're falling, talk about existential angst. We're seeing you said the fact that marketing exists means that we're all, categories, and like people generally want the same stuff. Generally,
Mm-hmm.
we all want to feel good. Like we all want to feel, we all want to have energy and be able to activate it and use it all the time. Um, we all want to be okay with how we look, you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that means different things to different people. But in general, we all want to like how we look or be okay with how we look. Um, yeah, it's things like that, of that nature, and we're presented with, here's how you should think about that quite often, because that's advertising, that's marketing.
Mm-hmm. Even within the spaces that are supposed to be helping people, because like I've been thinking about it a lot lately, where it's like I've got for sure one of the books that like I want to write that's like in the self development category. I plan to either get a publishing deal or just do print on demand orders, whatever. But I'm gonna put it out as a PDF for free. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
want to know what it is, just have it, right? Like if it's good for people, don't sell it, right? And the trouble is everybody, even in spaces that are supposed to be fitness and mental health, and like they're all trying to sell you stuff. So it then gears towards these, extremes things, or like I have the answer stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or there's, the sales funnel of you toe the line a little bit. Like the hook's in, but you gotta wait for the fish to kind of really go for it, and then you do the. So
mm-hmm.
they only give bits of information at a time. They never
Yeah,
give you all of it. And if you're smart, if you're aware, then you can, Steal Like an Artist, which is a great book whose author I can't remember. I apologize, but look up the book Steal Like an Artist. It's a nice little lesson on this. But if you're aware enough, you can still extrapolate useful information from not all from smaller parts of the picture.
because back to the skills transverse. Learn one thing to know 1,000 things. Like
Mm-hmm.
all the information's out there for free. Like little bits of it is it's the Sherlock Holmes thing where he like brags about like from a drop of water from a lake in London, I could tell you that the oceans must exist. He's like
Right.
because like the when you break down the components out and out and out, it's you get to the laws eventually,
Mm-hmm.
inevitably.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. This is a weird episode for us a
Right.
little bit.
And so I do want to like try and impart some advice if people want it. Like my antidote to this angst that we feel is to try and develop yourself in something, in a skill, because and it's not about getting good at, it's not about like monetizing, it's not about getting good at it, it's not about competing in whatever it is. Just the act of trying to get better is the experiment of thinking about it and reflecting upon it and experimenting and trying stuff. It's like back to the drawing board, stick to what works, find out what works, see if you can develop that. It's the process that I'm trying to get people to do. What it is doesn't matter. Like what the thing is, who cares? Hopefully something you enjoy and want to make a part of your life. But the process is what people need to try and immerse themselves into, because that is curiosity and action and gratitude and reflection and all the things we've been talking about to help lift ourselves out of this angst. And maybe
Yeah.
it just staves it off, right? Maybe the angst is just a part of the human condition. I don't know. Maybe that just staves it off, but that's good enough.
It gives you an anchor so that the ship of your like mind doesn't wander off into the storms or get
Absolutely.
capsized.
Because that's the phrase, right? Great sailors, what is it? A ship in the harbor does not make a great sailor. Whatever the phrase is.
Oh yeah.
So
Calm
that's
seas don't
just
make great sailors.
yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So
Because I was gonna push back and be like, like I think I still stand by like the general approach to the existential angst thing is like gratitude, curiosity, and action. Not necessary for anything specific. Um, but I do forget because of the hobby we do together besides this is so passive,
Mm-hmm.
um, how much it anchors me. Because like I'm not every day, uh, because we brew mead now. But it's not like something I'm doing every day. Like I don't, I've got to set it and forget it to some degree. But like I'm also reading the
Mm-hmm.
books on it, and it creates this through line, right? Where it's like I know days we're going to do bottling, I know days we're going to do like this other stuff. So it creates
Mm-hmm.
this stability that regardless of anything else that's happening, I'm going to brew that next batch. I'm going to bottle that
Right.
like that one. So
Right.
I do think there is something to
And
just having a thing you can connect
yeah,
through.
a thing, and we just by sheer wanting to enjoy the product, essentially, um, we want it to be better. We're making it better every time.
But
We're
and
not
answering to the
transforming it every
but
time.
answering to
But
the
it's
angst, like, well, it's like because it's like, oh, what I'm gonna like, what am I gonna do? What's right? Stuff like that. It's like, well, what's right is the better, right? So that coming back to just what should I do is like, well, I'm going to do this thing. I don't know. Back to like ignoring the existential crisis. Like it doesn't matter why. It's just this is the thing that I have a sense for. So I'm just gonna do it and like put myself into it. So it's like, okay, well, how am I going to be a good person? It's like, okay, well, that I don't know that. But rather than just being like, I don't know what I'm going to do at all, I know I've got some meat to take care of, right? So I know one thing. I know this is I guess like the point of like pick a thing is
mm-hmm.
don't let the angst be all encompassing. Because if you know, like, well, tomorrow I'm going to draw, tomorrow I'm going to do a workout, like tomorrow I'm going to practice an instrument. If you have one thing, you've back to the binary, you're 100% like stronger against the angst. The angst is not all encompassing. There is a place where the angst doesn't touch because you do know at least one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think and tying it all together, I need to take some gratitude towards that, which I think about it every once in a while. I push myself real close to the red, right? We talk about comfort zone,
Yeah,
uncomfortable,
yeah.
burnout zone. I have a
Mm-hmm.
bad habit of riding that right
Yep.
into that red.
And it's really important that we understand that that is not a static graph. Like the it's not like red is always this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the goal is that the green grows. You're in the yellow, basically pulling the green up
Yep.
with you. You're constantly like swimming upwards in the yellow, and it's pulling the green. Your comfort zone, your confidence is getting more, and red is either yellow's getting smaller, but in theory, you're always in the yellow, and red is always rising as
Yep.
well.
Mm-hmm.
So green should just be getting massive, while yellow maybe gets a little thinner, but is always pushing up, and red is slowly disappearing, essentially.
But it always stays above the yellow, right? Like, because there's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
the point of impossibility.
correct. Yes, yeah, because you run into the laws of physics.
Yeah, and my habit is just it's the divine dissatisfaction. It's like I don't like being comfortable. Like I have to people tell us like, oh, you should like rest and relax, and I have to like stare at them dumbfounded for a second. I'm like, you know what sounds nice? Getting some shit done.
Yeah, no, it's true.
But I do like I made a post about it with like video games. Like I do have to force myself, work at it, do a thing, set time aside in the same way I do regular project work or
Mhm.
whatever it is. Like, right, force myself to just play a game and be like fully invested in being good at it, just for its that isn't connected to any grander picture. It's just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, I will say, like, if you enjoy like work, fucking work.
The
Like,
the trouble is it spider webs out to other things. So there's
yeah,
all these emotions that tied to it. Versus like if I'm playing a game, I can immerse myself with that like level of work focus on it, without being like, oh right, because this ties into this other thing I'm doing, this other thing I'm doing. I'm not this other, like so you gotta pocket it.
that's a good point. That's why environment matters so much. Like,
Mm.
I talk about the gym, right? Like, my gym sessions are generally just under 2 hours these days. Because because I like trying to fill that list of stuff. I'm trying to like make sure I do all the stuff I want to do and cover all that. And if I feel like adding more, I definitely have the freedom to do that. But when I'm not in the gym, I'm not doing that, obviously. But like, you know, it's an obvious thing. But like, yeah, compartmentalization is its own skill for sure. If you're like, if the pie chart of your life is, you know, constantly, you know, zigzagging between different, if it's growing one side all the time and then shrinking and all that, like, that's not good. Find the Pareto principle of your life, essentially. I love the Pareto principle. That is one of the laws, like the actual laws of the universe. Pareto's law.
The 2080, right?
Yeah, 80-20. Yeah. Yeah, generally known as the 80-20 rule is, think of two pie charts. 20% of one of them creates 80% of the other one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I have found that in my music career, I play all styles of music that a trombone can be played in. I've experimented in some that a trombone is not usually played in. Mixed reviews. But most of my financial and just career success comes from me playing in symphony orchestras. So, which is a small part, like 20% of what I do as a musician creates 80% of my success, you know? And that's a law literally everywhere, like everywhere.
Yeah, it holds.
Yeah.
All right,
So-
we're at the 2-hour mark.
Oh God.
Yeah, we haven't done this in a while.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And this is just, it gets us spider webbing, like you said.
Which
So,
is
but
why
this is really good.
I've had several people ask me, like, because we like took a little break, like, oh, so okay, you guys gonna do more? Yeah, like, do you have enough to like keep doing episodes? I'm like, on the first round of things we wrote, was it 2 years of 2 episodes every month?
Yeah.
And that was just one
riffing.
Yeah,
We were just riffing.
That was a
ideas.
30-minute brainstorm. I was like, we're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's
the
not
thing
including
about
the
us.
guest, which we're so, yeah, we had like a golden time for like scheduling, but definitely want to get back to that.
Absolutely.
So,
But this is good.
might as well say I have some angst to get it done.
I mean, yes. I was going to say I'm grateful for you, but
oh,
no, I'm kidding.
I'm going to take an action and end this.